ओम उपदेशसहस्री आद्यशंकराचार्य कृत प्रकरण 17 सम्यक मति प्रकरणम चैप्टर 17 राइट नॉलेज आत्मा ज्ञेयः परो ह्यात्मा यस्मादन्यन्न विद्यते सर्वज्ञः सर्वदृक् शुद्धस्तस्मै ज्ञेयात्मने नमः. The self to be known, not as an object, is beyond everything as there exists nothing else. I bow down to that pure, all-knowing and omniscient one which is to be known. पदवाक्य प्रमाणज्ञैर्दीपभूतैः प्रकाशितं ब्रह्मवेदरहस्यं यैस्तान्नित्यं प्रणतोऽस्म्यहम्. I always bow down to those teachers who are conversant with words, sentences, and sources of knowledge, and who, like lamps, have shown clearly to us Brahman, the secret of the Vedas. Yadvak Suryam Shu Sampatan Pranashta यद्वाक् सूर्यांशु सम्पात प्रनष्टध्वान्तकल्मषः प्रणम्यतान् गुरून् वक्षे ब्रह्मविद्याविनिश्चयम्. I bow down to my teacher whose words fell into my ears and destroyed ignorance in me, like the sun's rays falling on darkness and destroying it. I shall now state the right conclusion about the knowledge of Brahman. आत्मलाभात् परो नान्यो लाभः कश्चन विद्यते यदर्था वेदवादाश्च स्मार्ताश्चापि तुयाः क्रियाः. There is no other attainment higher than that of the self, for that is the purpose for which the teachings of the Vedas, the Smritis and the actions described in the work portion of the Vedas are there. They lead to knowledge through the purification of the mind. Atmarthopi hiyo labha sukha yeshto viparyayah atmalabha paraprokto nityatvat brahmavedibhihi. The acquisition such as fame, wealth and so on, considered to be a source of happiness on the part of oneself, pain owing to the loss of such acquisition, oneself producing the opposite results also. The knowers of Brahman say that the greatest acquisition is that of the self as it is eternal. स्वयं लब्धस्वभावत्वात् लाभस्तस्य न चान्यतः अन्यापेक्षस्तु यो लाभस्तोऽन्यत् दृष्टिसमुद्भवः. On the nature of being always, for it is the self, attained, the self does not depend on anything else in order to be acquired. The acquisition that depends on other things, example, efforts, etc., is due to ignorance and so vanishes when the means to which it is due vanish. अन्यदृष्टिस्त्वया विद्या स्यात् तन्नाशो मोक्षो उच्यते ज्ञानेनैव तु सोऽपि स्याद् विरोधित्वान्न कर्मणा. The conception of the existence of the non-self is ignorance, the destruction of which is known to be liberation. This destruction is possible by means of knowledge, only which is incompatible with ignorance. Compatible with ignorance. Actions can destroy it. Actions cannot destroy it. कर्म कार्यस्तु नित्यस्यादविद्या कामकारणः प्रमाणं वेद एवात्र ज्ञानस्याधिगमे स्मृतः. That actions produced by desires caused by ignorance give rise to perishable results. Higher regions. And that knowledge produces an imperishable result, liberation, which is the self itself and therefore imperishable, are known on the evidence of the Vedas. ज्ञानेकार्थपरत्वात्तं वाक्यमेकं ततो विदुः एकत्वं यात्मनो ज्ञेयं वाक्यार्थप्रतिपत्तितः. The learned know the Vedas, the work and the knowledge portion of the Vedas. The work portion leads an aspirant performing Vedic actions through the purification of the mind to self-knowledge. The learned know the Vedas to be one continuous whole, the only purpose of which is to demonstrate one thing, namely knowledge, in as much as the oneness of the self with Brahman, is to be known by the understanding of the Vedic sentences such as thou art that, I am Brahman, and so on. Vachyavedat tu tadvedak kalpyo vachyo hitachruteः त्रयं त्वेतत् ततः प्रोक्तं रूपं नाम च कर्म च. One may object that Brahman and the individual self different from each other as they are the meaning of two words which are not synonymous. The objection is not reasonable inasmuch as one has to know the difference between the words from that between their meanings and the difference between their meanings from that between the words. Therefore, the objector is led to the fallacy of reciprocal dependence. So, no difference between them can be accepted, there being no Vedic evidence. Objection. As the Shruti states, three things besides the self, namely names, forms, and actions, it evidently supports the existence of things other than the self. Oneness of the self is Brahman. For the असदेतत्रयं तस्मादन्योन्येन हि कल्पितं कृतो वर्णो यथा शब्दाश्रुतोऽन्यत्र धिया बहिः दृष्टं चापि यथा रूपं बुद्धेः शब्दाय कल्पते एवमेतज्जगत् सर्वं भ्रान्तिबुद्धिविकल्पितम्. As they are interdependent, like a painting and a description of it, those three are unreal. For we paint a picture, say, of a god with the help of imagination. When we hear a word, namely the name of the god, again similarly, we give a name to a painting when we see it, say, on a wall. So, the whole of the universe exists only for a deluded intellect. असदेतत् ततो युक्तं सच्चिन्मात्रं न कल्पितं वेदश्चापि स एवाद्यो वेद्यं चान्यत्तु कल्पितम्. It is therefore reasonable that these three are unreal. Existence, knowledge only is real, existing prior to everything. It is both the knower and known. How it is both the knower and the known is explained in the next two verses. It is the other things, that is name, form and action only, that are unreal. येन वेत्ति स वेदस्यात् स्वप्ने सर्वं तु मायया येन पश्यति तच्चक्षुश्शृणोति श्रोत्रमुच्यते येन स्वप्नगतो वक्ति सा वाग्घ्राणं तथैव च रसनस्पर्शने चैव मनश्चान्यत् तथेन्द्रियम्. Existence knowledge through which all things in dream are known is the knower, for there is no other illuminator there. It is the same entity that is the known, for there are no objects of knowledge in dream. In dream by Maya, it is the same consciousness through which one sees, hears, speaks, smells, tastes, touches, and thinks. In that state is respectively called the eye, the ear, the larynx, the auditive organ, the tongue, the organ of touch, and the mind. Similarly, it is the same consciousness that becomes in dream, the other organs also functioning variously. कल्प्योपाधिभिरेवैतद्भिन्नं ज्ञानमनेकधा आदिभेदाद् यथा भेदो मणिरेकस्य जायते. Just as the same jewel assumes different colors owing to its proximity to different colored things, so this pure consciousness assumes different forms on account of various adjuncts which are superimposed on it in dream, the knower, the known, and the instrument of knowledge. These are the forms that it assumes. जागृतश्च यथा भेदो ज्ञानस्यास्य विकल्पितः बुद्धिस्थं व्याकरोत्यर्थं भ्रान्त्या तृष्णोद्भवक्रियः. As in dream, so in the waking state, different forms are superimposed on this consciousness. It manifests the objects of the intellect when it performs actions produced by desires due to delusion. स्वप्ने तद्वत् प्रबोधेयो बहिश्चान्तस्तथैव च आलेख्याध्ययने यद्वत् तदन्योन्यधियोद्भवम्. The events in the waking state are similar to those in dream. The ideas of the interior and exterior in the former state is as unreal as in the latter, like reading and writing, depending on each other. Reading depends on a written page, without which nothing can be read, and writing also depends on reading, as we first read and then write. So both of them are unreal, as the sounds represented by writing letters are all pervasive and have no forms. Hence they can neither be really written nor read. As reading and writing depending on each other. यदायं कल्पयेद् भेदं तत्कामस्तन्यथा क्रतुः यत्कामस्तत्क्रतुर्भूत्वा कृतं यत्तत् प्रपद्यते. When the self manifests different objects, it desires to have them, and accordingly there arises in it a determination to acquire those objects. It then meets with those particular results of actions done according to particular desires, followed by particular determinations. अविद्या प्रभवं सर्वम् असत् तस्मादिदं जगत् तद्वता दृश्यते यस्मात् सुषुप्ते न च गृह्यते. Unperceived in deep sleep. Though there is ignorance in deep sleep, one is then not conscious of it. Unperceived in deep sleep, but perceived in waking and dream by those only who are ignorant. The whole of this universe, consisting of name, form, and action, is an outcome of ignorance and therefore unreal. विद्या विद्ये श्रुति प्रोक्ते एकत्वान्य धियो हिनः तस्मात् सर्वप्रयत्नेन शास्त्रे विद्या विधीयते. It is said in the Shruti that the consciousness of the oneness of the individual self and Brahman is knowledge, and that of a difference between them is ignorance. Knowledge is therefore demonstrated in the scriptures with great care, for without being demonstrated it does not arise. Knowledge is therefore demonstrated in the scriptures with great care. चित्ते दर्शवद् यस्मात् शुद्धे विद्या प्रकाशते यमेर्नित्यश्च यज्ञश्च तपोभिस्तस्य शोधनम्. When the mind becomes purified like a mirror, knowledge is revealed in it. Care should therefore be taken to purify the mind by yama, speaking the truth, non-stealing, continence, non-injury, and non-acceptance of gifts. Niyama, external and internal cleanliness, contentment, study of the Vedas, and meditation on God. Sacrifices enjoined according to one's own caste and order of life, the result being offered to the Lord by the performer. And religious austerities. Shariradi tapah kuryat tadvishuddhyarthamuttamam manadi samadhanam tattati deha vishoshanam. The best austerities regarding the body, the mind, and the speech should be practiced in order to purify the mind. The controlling of the mind and the emaciating of the body should be undertaken. Manasaschendriyanam cha yekagram paramam tapah tajjaya sarvadharmebhyas sadharmah para uchyate. The attainment of the one-pointedness of the mind and the senses is the best of austerities. It is superior to all religious duties and all other austerities. Regarding Brahman, one-pointedness regarding Brahman. Drushtam jagaritam vidyat smrutam swapne tadevatu tadabhavam cha swamatmanam param padam. Sensuous perceptions are to be regarded as the waking state. Those very perceptions revealed in sleep as impressions constitute the dream state. The absence of perceptions and their impressions is known to be deep sleep. The witness of the three states, one's own self, should be regarded as the supreme goal to be realized, that is Brahman. Sushuptyakhyam tamodjnanam बीजं स्वप्नप्रबोधयोः स्वात्मबोधप्रदग्धं स्यात् बीजं दग्धं यथा भवम्. What is called deep sleep? It is called ignorance because the modifications of ignorance are there in it. Darkness. The word indicates a positive entity and hence it can be the material cause of the three states. What is called deep sleep, darkness or ignorance is the seed of the waking and dream states. It gets perfectly burnt by the fire of self-knowledge and is no more produces effects like a burnt seed that does not germinate. तदेवैकं त्रिधा ज्ञेयं मायाबीजं पुनः क्रमात् मायाव्यात्मा विकारोऽपि बोधैको जलार्कवत्. That one seed called Maya is evolved into the three states, waking, dream and deep sleep, which come one after another again and again. The self, the substratum of Maya, though one only and immutable, appears to be many like reflections of the sun in water. बीजं चैकं यथा भिन्नं प्राणस्वप्नादिभिस्तथा स्वप्नजागृतशरीरेषु तद्वच्चात्मा जलेन्दुवत्. Just as the one seed called Maya is regarded as different according to different states, such as the undifferentiated dream, etc. So the self appears to be different in waking and dream bodies. Hiranyagarbha or the aggregate vital force before it is manifested. Just as the sea may be regarded as the aggregate of waves, the self appears to be different in waking and dream bodies, both individual and aggregate, like reflections of the moon in water. Maya hastinamaruhya maya veko yatha vrajet agachanstadvadevatma prana swapnadi gochala. Just as a magician comes and goes on an elephant created by him by his own magic, so the self, though devoid of all motion, appears to be undergoing conditions such as the undifferentiated dream, etc. न हस्ति न तदारूढ़ो मायाव्यन्यो यथा स्थितः न प्राणादि न तद्रष्टा तथा अन्योन्यस्तदादृशिः. Just as in the above example, there is no elephant nor its driver, but there stands the magician different from them. So there are no undifferentiated nor there knower. The witness, which is always of the nature of pure consciousness, is different from them. अबद्धचक्षुषो नास्ति माया माया विनोऽपि वा बद्धाक्षस्यैव सा माया अमायाव्येव ततो भवेत्. There is no magic for the people of right vision, nor for the magician itself. It is only for the people of clouded vision that magic exists. Hence one not really a magician wrongly appears to be so. So it is the ignorant only that wrongly believe that Brahman is the wielder of Maya, which is equally non-existent both for men of knowledge and for Brahman. साक्षादेवस्य विज्ञेयः साक्षादात्मेति च श्रुतैः विद्यते हृदयग्रन्थिर्न चेदित्यादितश्रुतैः The self should be regarded as Brahman itself in accordance with the Shrutis. The self is immediate. All knots of the heart are torn asunder, if not, and so on. अशब्दादित्वतो नास्य ग्रहणं चेन्द्रियैर्भवेत् सुखादिभ्यस्तथान्यत्वाद् बुद्ध्या वापि कथं भवेत्. Objection. It is not perceived by the senses as it is devoid of sound, etc. Again, how can it be perceived by the intellect as it is different from pleasure and so on? अदृश्योऽपि यथा राहुश्चन्द्रे बिम्बं यथाम्भसि सर्वगोऽपि तथैवात्मा बुद्धावेव स गृह्यते. Reply. Just as Rahu, the name Rahu is the name of Daitya or demon, who is supposed to seize the sun and moon and thus cause eclipses, or the shadow of the earth and that of the moon falling on the moon and on the sun respectively during lunar and solar eclipses, is what is known to be Rahu. Just as Rahu, though invisible, is seen in the moon during an eclipse, and the reflections of the moon, etc., are seen in water, so the self, though omnipresent, is perceived in the intellect. भानोर्बिम्बं यथा चौष्ण्यं जले दृष्टं न चाम्भसः बुद्धो बोधो न तद्धर्मस्तथैव स्याद्विधर्मतः. Just as the reflection and the heat of the sun found in water do not belong to water, so consciousness, though perceived in the intellect, is not its quality, for it is of a nature opposite to that of the intellect. चक्षुर्युक्ता धियो वृत्तिर्यातां पश्यन्न लुप्तदृक् दृष्टिर्द्रष्टा भवेदात्मा श्रुतैश्रोता तथा भवेत्. केवलां मनसो वृत्तिं पश्यन् मन्तामतेरजः विज्ञाता लुप्तशक्तित्वात् तथा शास्त्रं न हीत्यतः. The self whose consciousness never goes out of existence is called the seer of seeing when it illumines the modification of the intellect connected with the eye, and similarly it is called the hearer of hearing, and so on. The unborn one is called the thinker of thought when it illumines that modification of the mind which is independent of external objects. It is called the knower as its power of consciousness never fails. So the Shruti says, the seeing of the seer is not destroyed. ध्यायतीत्यविकारित्वं तथा लीलायतीत्यपि अत्रस्तेनेति शुद्धत्वं तथा नन्वागतं श्रुतेः. That the self is immutable is known from the Shrutis as if it were at rest, and it moves as if. As it were. That it is pure is known from other Shrutis. The thief in this state, etc., and unattached, etc. In deep sleep, the objects of knowledge get merged in ignorance. शक्तिलोपात् सुषुप्ते ज्ञस्तथा बोधे विकारतः ज्ञेयस्यैव विशेषस्तु यत्र वेति श्रुतेर्वचः. The self is conscious even in deep sleep as well as in waking and dream, as its power of consciousness never ceases to exist, and as it is changeless. It is only in the objects of knowledge that there is difference. In dreamless sleep, as the Shruti says, when there is व्यवधानाद्धिपारोक्षं लोकदृष्टेरनात्मनः दृष्टेरात्मस्वरूपत्वात् प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म तत्स्मृतम्. The consciousness, that is modification of the mind reflecting pure consciousness, the consciousness of objects which arises out of the functioning of the eye, etc. The non-self is immediately known, for it depends on an intervening reflection of the self in order to be known, as Brahman in the self of phenomenal consciousness. It is immediately known. नहि दीपान्तरापेक्षा यद्वद्दीपप्रकाशने बोधस्यात्मस्वरूपत्वान्न बोधोऽन्यस्तथेष्यते. Just as a second lamp is not necessary in order to illumine a lamp, so a second consciousness is not necessary to make known pure consciousness, which is of the nature of the self. विषयत्वं विकारित्वं नानात्वं नानात्वं वा नहिष्यते न हेयो नाप्युपादेय आत्मा नान्येन वा ततः. The self is not an object of knowledge. There is no change or manyness in it. It is therefore capable of neither being accepted nor rejected by itself or by anyone else, for no one else exists except the self. सबाह्याभ्यन्तरो जीर्णो जन्म मृत्युजरातिगः अहमात्मेति यो वेत्ति कुतोऽन्वेव बिभेति सः. Why should a man have even the least fear who knows that he is the self, comprising the interior and exterior, beyond both decay, death and old age? The interior and exterior with reference to the body. The self is the substratum of both the interior and the exterior, together with the body. प्रागेवैतद्विधे कर्म वर्णित्वादेरपोहनात् तदस्थूलादिशास्त्रेभ्यस्तत्त्वमेवेति निश्चयात्. It is only before the negation of the idea of castes, etc. On the evidence, they are condition of fitness for Vedic actions. On the evidence of the Shruti, not large, and before the ascertainment of the nature of the self, on the authority of the sentence, thou art that, and also before the demonstration of the self to one on the part of the knowledge portion of the Vedas, that Vedic actions are to be performed and not afterwards. पूर्वदेह परित्यागे जात्यादीनां प्रहाणतः देहस्यैव तु जात्यादिस्तस्याप्येवं ह्यनात्मता. Caste etc. given up with the giving up of the previous body do belong to the body only and not to the self. For the very same reason of being perishable, the body is also not the self. ममाहं चेत्यतो विद्या शरीरादेष्वनात्मसु आत्मज्ञानेन हेया स्यादसुराणामिति श्रुतेः. The conception of me and mine with regard to the non-self, the body, etc., are due to ignorance and should be renounced by means of self-knowledge, as there is the Shruti of the Asuras, that is, opponents of gods. दशाः शौचकार्याणां पारिव्राज्ये निवर्तनं यथा ज्ञानस्य सम्प्राप्तौ तद्वज्जात्यादिकर्मणां. Just as the duty of observing defilement for 10 days following childbirth or the death of a kinsman is refrained from when one becomes a wandering religious mendicant, so the duties belonging to particular castes, etc., come to an end when right knowledge is achieved. यत्कामस्तत्क्रतुर्भूत्वा कृतं त्वज्ञः प्रपद्यते यदा स्वात्मदृशः कामाः प्रमुच्यन्ते मृतस्तदा. A man of ignorance reaps the results of those actions done according to particular desires, followed by particular determinations. But when the desires for these are in the mind, and such a man gives up his identification with it on the strength of self-knowledge. But when the desires of a man of self-knowledge vanish, he becomes immortal, Brahman. आत्मरूपविधेयकार्यं क्रियादिभ्यो निवर्तनं न साध्यं साधनं वात्मा नित्यतृप्तस्मृतेर्मतः. The outcome of the ascertainment of the real nature of the self is cessation from actions, etc., and from having an end or a means. For it is according to the Smriti, eternally contended. उत्पाद्याप्य विकार्याणि संस्कार्यं च क्रियाफलं नातोऽन्यत् कर्मणा कार्यं त्यजेत् तस्मात् sasadhanam. The results of actions are the production, acquisition, transformation, and purification of something. They produce no other results. All actions with their accessories should therefore be given up. Wives, children, wealth, sacred tuft of hair, and holy thread are the accessories are to be given up by one who aspires after liberation, which by its nature cannot be the result of any action. तापान्तत्वादनित्यत्वादात्मार्थत्वाच्च या बहिः संवृत्त्यात्मनितां प्रीतिं सत्यार्थी गुरुमाश्रयेत्. शान्तं प्राज्ञं तथा मुक्तं निष्क्रियं ब्रह्मणि स्थितं श्रुतेराचार्यवान् वेद तद्विद्धीति स्मृतेस्तथा. One desirous of attaining truth should withdraw into the self the love that he has for external persons or things. For this love, secondary to that of the self, is evanescent and entails pain. He then should take refuge in a teacher who is tranquil, free, bereft of actions, and established in Brahman. As the Shruti and Smriti say, one having a teacher knows and know that सगुरुस्तारयेद्युक्तं शिष्यं शिष्यगुणान्वितं ब्रह्मविद्याप्लवेनाशो स्वान्तध्वान्तमहोदधिम्. That teacher should immediately take the disciple in the boat of the knowledge of Brahman across the great ocean of the darkness, that is ignorance, which is within him. The disciple who is of a one-pointed mind and endowed with the qualities of a true disciple. दृष्टिस्पृष्टिश्रुतिर्घ्रातिर्मतिर्विज्ञातिरेव च शक्त्योऽन्याश्च विद्यन्ते चिद्रूपत्वेऽप्युपाधिभिः. The powers of seeing, touching, hearing, smelling, thinking, knowing, and so on, though of the nature of pure consciousness, differ on account of adjuncts, the eye, etc., the sense organs. अपायोद्भूतिः नाभिर्नित्यं दीप्यन् रविर्यथा सर्वज्ञः सर्वदृक्शुद्धः सर्वं जानाति सर्वदा. Just as the sun illumines the world with its rays, which are free from growth and decay, so the self always knows in general and all particular things and is pure. With its consciousness, which is itself, it knows all. अन्यदृष्टिशरीरस्थस्तावन्मात्रो यविद्यया जलेन्द्वाद्युपमाभिस्तु तद्धर्मा च विभाव्यते. Appearing to be in the body, gross and subtle, owing to ignorance and therefore appearing to be of the same size, as the body, the self is regarded as different from things other than the body and possessed of its qualities, like the moon, etc., reflected in water and appearing to be possessed of its qualities. दृष्ट्वा बाह्यं निमील्याथ स्मृत्वा तत् प्रविहाय च अथोन्मील्यात्मनो दृष्टिं ब्रह्म प्राप्तोत्तनध्वगः. One merges the gross external objects experienced in the waking state in the subtle objects experienced in dream, and these again in ignorance. One then comes to have the vision of the consciousness of the self, attains Brahman. For a clearer exposition, and has not to follow any path, northern or southern, the path which leads one to the region of Brahma, Hiranyagarbha, at death, the path leading to the region of the moon when one dies, are called northern and southern. प्राणाद्येवं त्रिकं हित्वा तीर्णोज्ञानमहोदधिं स्वात्मस्थो निर्गुणशुद्धो बुद्धो मुक्तस्वतो हि सः. Having thus renounced, that is one's identity with the three states, having thus renounced the three states of the undifferentiated, deep sleep, etc., one gets across the great ocean of ignorance, for one is by nature established in the self, without qualities, pure, awakened, and free. Ajoham chamaro mrityu rajaro bhaya eva cha सर्वज्ञः सर्वदृक्शुद्धः इति बुद्धो न जायते. One is not born again when one knows that one is unborn, deathless, devoid of old age, free from fear, pure and all-knowing. That is, knowing all particular things and things in general. पूर्वोक्तं यत्तमो बीजं तन्नास्तीति विनिश्चयः तदभावे कुतो जन्म ब्रह्मैक्यत्वं विजानतः. How can one be born again who has known the oneness of the self and Brahman and is sure of the non-existence of the seed called ignorance stated before? क्षीरात् सर्पैर्यथोद्धृत्य क्षिप्तं तस्मिन् पूर्ववत् बुद्ध्यादेर्ज्ञस्तथा सत्यान्न देहि पूर्ववत् भवेत्. When the witness is discriminated from the intellect, etc., which are unreal, it does not identify itself again with the gross or the subtle body as before, just as butter raised from milk and thrown into it does not get mixed with it again. Satyam jnanamanantam cha रसादेव पंचकात् परम स्यामदृशादि शास्त्रोक्तम् अहं ब्रह्मेति निर्भयः. One becomes free from fear when one knows that one is Brahman, which is existence, knowledge, and infinite beyond the five sheets consisting of food, the vital force, the mind, the intellect, and bliss, and which is described in the Shruti as not perceivable, and so on. यस्मात् भीताः प्रवर्तन्ते वाङ्मनः पावकादयः तदात्मानन्दतत्त्वज्ञो न बिभेति कुतश्चन. That knower of the truth of the bliss of the self has no cause of fear whatsoever. For afraid of him the organs of speech, the mind, fire, and so on act regularly. नामादिभ्यः परे भूम्नि स्वाराज्ये ज्योत्स्थितोद्वये प्रणमेत्कं तदात्मज्ञो न कार्यं कर्मणा तदा. Whom should the knower of the self salute if he is established in his own glory, which is infinite, non-dual, and beyond name, etc.? Actions then have no utility for him. विराड वैश्वानरो बाह्य स्मरन्नन्तः प्रजापतिः प्रविलीने तु सर्वस्मिन् प्राज्ञो व्याकृतमुच्यते. वाचारम्भणमात्रत्वात् सुषुप्तादित्रिकं त्वसत् सत्योज्ञश्चाहमित्येव सत्यसन्धो विमुच्यते. The externally conscious individual, which is one with the aggregate of the gross bodies, and the individual which is conscious internally only and one with the aggregate of the subtle bodies, are both merged in the individual experiencing deep sleep, which is one with the undifferentiated. As the three states, namely deep sleep, etc., have words only for their support, they are unreal. The truthful man, therefore, who knows that his existence, Brahman, gets liberated. His existence, Brahman, gets liberated. भावरूपत्वाद् यथा भानोर्नाहो रात्रे तथैव च ज्ञानाज्ञानेन मे स्यातां चिद्रूपत्वा विशेषतः. I have no knowledge or ignorance in me, as I am of the nature of homogeneous consciousness only. Just as there is no day or night in the sun, which is of the nature of light only. शास्त्रस्यानतिशङ्क्यत्वाद् ब्रह्मैवस्यामहं सदा ब्रह्मणो मे न हेयं स्याद् ग्राह्यं वेति च संस्मरेत्. As the truth of the scriptures may never be doubted, one should always remember that one is Brahman and therefore has nothing to accept or reject. अहमेव च भूतेषु सर्वेष्वेको नभो यथा मयि सर्वाणि भूतानि पश्यन्नेवं न जायते. A man is never born again who knows that he is the one existence in all beings, like the ether, and that all beings are in him. न बाह्यं मध्यतो वान्तर्विद्यते न्यत् स्वतः क्वचित् अबाह्यान्तश्रुते किञ्चित् तस्मात् शुद्धः स्वयं प्रभः. The self is pure and self-effulgent, having by nature no interior, exterior, middle or anything else anywhere according to the Shruti, devoid of the interior and exterior. नेति नेत्यादिशास्त्रेभ्यः प्रपञ्चोपशमोद्वयः अविज्ञातादिशास्त्राच्च नैव ज्ञेयो यतोऽन्यथा. The self is non-dual and left over by the negation of the universe according to the Shruti. Not this, not this. It should be known as described in the Shruti, unknown, nowhere, and never otherwise. सर्वस्यात्माहमेवेति ब्रह्मचेद्विदितं परं स आत्मा सर्वभूतानामात्मा येषामिति श्रुतेः. If one knows that one is the Supreme Brahman, the self of all, one should be regarded as the self of all beings according to the Shruti, their self. जीवश्चेत् परमात्मानं स्वात्मानं देवमञ्जसा देवोपास्यः स देवानां पशुत्वाच्च निवर्तते. An individual becomes adorable by gods and free from being under their control, unlike beasts under men, if he clearly knows the Supreme Self, the Shining One, to be himself. अहमेव सदात्मज्ञः शून्यस्त्वन्यैर्यथाम्बरम् इत्येवं सत्यसन्धत्वाद् असद्धाता न बध्यते. असद्धाता न बध्यते. The truthful man who has renounced everything unreal does not get bound again when he knows that he is always consciousness, the eternally existing self, devoid of everything like the ether. कृपणास्तेऽन्यथैवातो विदुर्ब्रह्म परं हि ये स्वराड्यो नन्यदृक् स्वस्थस्तस्य देवा असन्वशे. Those are to be pitied who know the Supreme Brahman to be otherwise, that is to be other than self, other than the self. Those on the other hand who know it to be not different from themselves are established in the self and are their own masters, not subordinate to anyone else. They have all the gods under their control. हित्वा जात्यादिसम्बन्धान् वाचोऽन्यासकर्मभिः ओमित्येवं सदात्मानं सर्वं शुद्धं प्रपद्यथ सेतुं सर्वव्यवस्थानाम् अहोरात्रादिवर्जितं तिर्यगूर्ध्वमदः सर्वं सकृज्योतिरनामयम्. Give up all connections with caste, etc., all actions and all talk regarding the not self. Always meditate on the pure self, the all comprehensive principle as Om. The sound Om is the name and symbol of Brahman. The all comprehensive principle as Om, the self which, like a causeway protects cornfields, etc., by preventing water from entering into them. Protects causeway. Which, like a causeway, protects everything established, such as castes, orders of life, etc., and which, untouched by day and night, is all directions, horizontal, upward, downward, and which, free from unhappiness, is of the nature of eternal consciousness. धर्माधर्म विनिर्मुक्तं भूतभव्यात् कृताकृतात् स्वमात्मानं परं विद्यात् विमुक्तं सर्वबन्धनैः. One should know oneself to be the Supreme Brahman, free from all bondage, merit, demerit, past, future, cause and effect. अकुर्वन् सर्वकृच्छुद्धस्तिष्ठन्नत्येति धावतः मायया सर्वशक्तित्वादजस्सन् बहुधा मतः. The self is the doer of everything, though it is a non-doer. It is pure. It runs ahead of those that run, though it does not move at all. It appears to be many, though unborn, for it possesses all powers by Maya. राजवत्साक्षिमात्रत्वात् सान्निध्यात् भ्रामको यथा भ्रामयन् जगदात्माहं निष्क्रियो कारको द्वयः. Without action, a non-agent, and one without a second, I, the universal self, make the world go round like a king who is only a witness, or like the lodestone which moves iron by its proximity only. निर्गुणं निष्क्रियं नित्यं निर्द्वन्द्वं यन्निरामयं शुद्धं बुद्धं तथा मुक्तं तदस्मीति तद्ब्रह्मास्मीति धारयेत्. One should have the conception that one is Brahman, which is without qualities, without actions, eternal, free from duality, free from unhappiness, pure, awakened and free. बन्धं मोक्षं च सर्वं यत् इदमुभयं हेयमेक बन्धं मोक्षं च सर्वं यत् इदमुभयं हेयमेकं गयं च नेयं नेयाभ्यतीतं परं मम अधिगतं तत्त्वमेकं विशुद्धं विज्ञायैतत् यथावत् श्रुतिमुनिगदितं शोकमोहावतीतः सर्वज्ञः सर्वकृत् स्याद्भव भयरहितो ब्राह्मणो वाप्तकृत्यः. Having gained a perfect knowledge of bondage and liberation with their causes, namely ignorance and knowledge respectively, having acquired a special having acquired a complete understanding of the cause and effect, which are objects of knowledge and are therefore to be negated, and having properly known the one supreme and pure truth to be the self, which is beyond all objects of knowledge, known in the Vedantas and taught by Shrutis and knowers of Brahman, one stands freed from the fear of being born again, becoming all knowing, has everything accomplished, goes beyond grief and delusion, and therefore has the acme of his life fulfilled. न स्वयं स्वस्य नान्यश्च नान्यस्यात्मा च हेयगः उपादेयो न चाप्येवमिति सम्यक् मतिस्मृता. The self cannot be accepted or rejected by itself or others, nor does it accept or reject anyone else. This is right knowledge. Right knowledge 15. This is 20. 16. आत्मप्रत्यायिका ह्येषा सर्ववेदान्तगोचरा ज्ञात्वैतां हि विमुच्यन्ते सर्वसंसारबन्धनैः. For this knowledge, the subject of all the Vedantas produces the conviction that the self is Brahman. One becomes perfectly free from the bondage of this transmigratory existence when one achieves it. रहस्यं सर्ववेदानां देवानां चापि यत्परं पवित्रं परमं येतत् तदेतत् सम्प्रकाशितम्. This knowledge, the supreme purifier, the greatest secret. For this knowledge does not come from being taught by a teacher. And for this knowledge does not come without being taught by a teacher. So, the greatest secret of all the Vedas and gods, not easily attainable even by gods, is revealed here in this chapter. नैतद्देयमशान्ताय रहस्यं ज्ञानमुत्तमं विरक्ताय प्रदातव्यं शिष्यायानुगताय च. This supreme and secret knowledge should not be imparted to one who has not controlled oneself, but should be given to a disciple who is obedient and dispassionate. ददतश्चात्मनो ज्ञानं निष्क्रयोऽन्यो न विद्यते ज्ञानमिच्छंस्तरेत् तस्माद् युक्तः शिष्यगुणैः सदा. As there is no other equivalent which a disciple may offer to the teacher for imparting to him self-knowledge, one should always possess the qualities of a disciple, achieve knowledge, and thus get across the ocean of transmigratory existence. ज्ञानं ज्ञेयं तथा ज्ञाता यस्मादन्यो न विद्यते सर्वज्ञः सर्वशक्तिर्यस्तस्मै ज्ञानात्मने नमः. I bow down to that all-pervading and all-powerful One, who is of the nature of consciousness, and besides whom there is nothing else, namely a knower, knowledge, or an object of knowledge. विद्यया तारितास्मो यैर्जन्ममृत्युमहोदधिं सर्वज्ञेभ्यो नमस्तेभ्यो गुरुभ्यो ज्ञानसङ्कुलम्. I bow down to my most adorable teacher, who is all-knowing and has, by imparting knowledge to me, saved me from the great ocean of births and deaths filled with ignorance. तत्वमसि प्रकरणम 18. Chapter 18. Thou art that. येनात्मना विलीयन्ते उद्भवन्ति च वृत्तयः नित्यावगतये तस्मै नमोऽधि प्रत्ययात्मने. I bow down to that eternal consciousness, the self of the modifications of the intellect, in which, just as circles of fire, example in a revolving torch, merge in and spring from fire, in which they merge, example namo yatindraya gurorgariyase. I bow down to the great mendicant, the teacher of my teacher, who of great intellect rooted hundreds of enemies of the Shruti by means of words comparable to swords, and made impenetrable through thunder-like reasons, and who protected the treasure of the real import of the Vedas. नित्यमुक्तः सदैवास्मीत्येवं चेन्न भवेन्मतिः किमर्थं श्रावयत्येव मातृवत् श्रुतिरादरात्. If the conviction I am nothing but existence and am ever free were impossible to be attained, why should the Shruti teach us that so affectionately, like a mother? सिद्धा देवाहमित्यस्माद्युष्मद्धर्मो निषिध्यते रज्वामिवा हि धीर्युक्त्या तत्त्वमित्यादिशासनैः. Just as the idea of a snake is negated from a rope in a rope snake, so everything of the nature of the non-self is negated from the eternally existing self implied by the word I. On the evidence of the Shrutis, thou art that thou art. And by reasoning, शास्त्र प्रामाण्यतो ज्ञेया धर्मादेरस्थिता यथा विशापोः यथा ध्यानात् मुति स्यात् पाप्मनस्तथा. Brahman should be regarded as the self on the evidence of the scriptures, just as religious duties are known from the same source. Ignorance vanishes immediately on the attainment of right knowledge, like the effect of poison coming to an end when mantras are remembered, sacred formulas addressing to individual deities like Garuda and others are mantras. सद्ब्रह्माहं करोमीति प्रत्ययावात्मसाक्षिकौ तयोरज्ञानजस्यैव त्यागो युक्ततरो मतः सदस्मीति प्रमाणोत्था धीरन्यातन्निबोद्भवा प्रत्यक्षादीनिभावापि बाध्यते दिग्भ्रमादिवत्. It is reasonable that of the two ideas, I am existence Brahman and I am an agent, both of which have the self for their witness. The one owing its origin to ignorance should be given up, springing from evidences which are only apparently so, namely sense perceptions, etc. It gets negated like a mistaken notion of a direction by the other one, which has its source in the right evidence of the Vedas. कुरु भोक्तेति यच्छास्त्रं लोकबुद्धिनुवादितत् सदस्मीति श्रुतेर्जाता बाध्यते न्ययितयैव धीः. When they say do this and you are experiencers, the scriptures restate popular conceptions. The knowledge I am existence arises from the Shruti. The other, for they are the words of the Lord, arising from injunctive scriptures, is negated by it. सदैव त्वमसि इत्युक्ते नात्मनो मुक्तता स्थिरा प्रवर्तते प्रसञ्चक्ष्मा अतो चक्षाम् अतो युक्त्यानुचिन्तयेत्. The idea of agency and experiencing. Objections. Absolute liberation does not arise when one is told thou art that. One should therefore have recourse to the reiteration of the idea I am Brahman and support it with reasoning. सकृदुक्तं न गृह्णाति वाक्यार्थज्ञोऽपि यो भवेत् अपेक्षते तैवान्यादवोचाम द्वयं हि तत्. Even acquainted with the literal meaning of the sentence that thou art, one once told cannot know its true import, but requires other things which we, as we have said, are too. Mental repetition of the sentence and looking for reasoning in support of it. नियोगो प्रतिपन्नत्वात् कर्मणां स यथा भवेत् अविरुद्धो भवेत् तावत् यावत् संवेद्यता दृढा. Just as an injunction regarding Vedic actions is necessary, even when actions are known from Vedic statements, an injunction regarding them is necessary, so that one may get the result arising from the observance of the injunction. So, it is not incompatible in the case of one, so long as one has not directly known the self, and self-knowledge has not been firmly grasped by one. चेष्टितं च तथा मिथ्या स्वच्छन्दः प्रतिपद्यते प्रसंख्यानमतः कार्यं यावदात्मानुभूतये. All one's efforts, namely self-control, etc., become useless if one can know Brahman without being enjoined. One should therefore go on with the repetition so long as the self is not known. सदस्मीति च विज्ञानम् अक्षजो बाधते ध्रुवं शब्दोत्थं दृढसंस्कारो दोषैश्चाकृष्यते बहिः firm impressions originating from sense perception do surely negate the knowledge I am Brahman arising from the Shruti, from the Vedic statement that thou art. Moreover, as aspirant is attracted towards external objects through impurities such as attachment and so on. श्रुतानुमानजन्मानौ सामान्यविषयौ यतः प्रत्ययावक्षजो वश्यं विशेषार्थो निवारयेत्. Perceptional knowledge. Example, the knowledge that arises by actually seeing fire. Perceptional knowledge which has for its objects particular properties of things does surely contradict that. The knowledge that arises on hearing the word fire or through inference on seeing smoke contradicts that which arises from hearsay and inference and which is related only to generic properties of things. वाक्यार्थ प्रत्ययैकश्चेन्निर्दुःखो नोपलभ्यते यदि वा दृश्यते कश्चित् वाक्यार्थ श्रुतिमात्रतः निर्दुःखोऽतीतदेहेषु कृतभावो न मीयते चर्या नो शास्त्रसंवेद्या स्यादनिष्टं तथा सति. No one is seen freed from the distress of this transmigratory existence simply by understanding the meaning of the sentence. If however a rare man, example Vamadeva, who while in his mother's womb had self-knowledge, if however a real man is seen to be freed from such distress on the mere hearing of it, he must be inferred to have practiced repetition in previous lives. Moreover, the conduct of mendicants, our conduct will have to be regarded as non-scriptural if you do not admit the existence of an injunction. In this case, in the case of one who has become acquainted with the sentence but not with the self, but that is not desirable. सदस्येति फलम् चोक्त्वा विधेयं साधनं यतः न तदन्यत् प्रसंख्यानात् प्रसिद्धार्थमिहेष्यते. Just as everywhere in the Vedas the means to the end is enjoined after stating the result. For example, desirous of attaining heaven, a man should perform sacrifices. Similarly, desirous of attaining Brahman, one should practice the said repetition. Result to be achieved. So here in the Vedantas, the result that thou art is stated, and the means can be nothing but this repetition, which only and not sacrifices etc. is regarded as being capable of revealing an eternally existing thing, that is Brahman. तस्मादनुभवायैव प्रसञ्चक्षेत यत्नतः त्यजन् साधनतत् साध्य विरुद्धं शमनादिमान्. Therefore, practicing self-control etc. and renouncing everything, all actions incompatible with this end, the direct knowledge of Brahman, and the means, the said repetition. To it, one should carefully practice the said reiteration in order directly to know the self. नैतदेवं रहस्यानां नेति नित्यवसानतः क्रिया साध्यं पुराश्राव्यं न मोक्षो नित्यसिद्धतः. Reply: This is not so, for the Upanishads end with Brahman having duality negated from it. Upanishad end with not this, and deal with nothing. That is, they do not enjoin actions, nothing else. Results to be achieved by means of actions are heard of in the work portion part of the Vedas, but not liberation, which has an eternal existence and not achievable by means of any action. पुत्र दुःखं यथाध्यस्तं पित्रा दुःखे स्वात्मनि अहं कर्ता तथाध्यस्तो नित्या दुःखे स्वात्मनि. Just as the distress experienced by one's son is superimposed by the father on himself, who has no distress at all, so the ego is superimposed on the self, which is eternally free from any pain whatsoever. सोऽध्यासो नेति नेतीति प्राप्तवत् प्रतिषिध्यते भूयोऽध्यासविधिः कश्चित् कुतश्चेन्नोपपद्यते. This superimposition of the ego on the self is negated on the evidence of the Shruti, not this, as if, for it is only things superimposed that are negated. For as if it were a reality, and hence no injunctions such as the repetition of the sentence, which are all due to superimposition, can by any means be reasonable after such a negation has taken place. आत्मनीह तथाध्यासः प्रतिषेधस्तथैव च मलाध्यासनिषेधौखे क्रियेते च यथा अबुधैः. Just as color is superimposed on and negated from the sky by ignorant people, so there are the superimposition of the ego on the self and its negation from it. प्राप्तश्चेत् प्रतिषिद्धेत मोक्षो अनित्यो भवेत् ध्रुवम् अतो अप्राप्तनिषेधोऽयं निर्दिव्यग्निचयनादिवत्. This negation is not one of a reality, but of a false superimposition, only like the prohibition of the placing of fire on the highest region of the sky. For liberation would have surely been transitory if things really existing were negated. So placing of fire is, there is the scriptural statement that the fire should be placed neither in the highest nor in the middle region of the sky. The placing of fire in those two regions is an impossibility. Still, it is forbidden, like the real placing of fire on the earth. संभाव्य गोचरे शब्द प्रत्ययो वानचान्यथा न संभाव्यो तदात्मत्वादहं कर्तुस्तथैव च. It is only to objects of knowledge and not to non-objects that a word or an idea is applied. Word, all the evidences, an idea through the indiscrimination between the intellect and the self. Brahman, which is the self of them and also of the ego, is not within the scope of a word or an idea. Aham kartratmane nyastam chaitanye kartrutadiyat eti neti iti tatsarvam saham kartra nishidyate. Everything such as agency, etc., superimposed through the indiscrimination between the intellect and the self by the ego and the self, pure consciousness is negated together with the ego on the evidence of the Shruti, not this, not this. उपलब्धि स्वयं ज्योतिर्दृशि प्रत्यक्ष सदक्रियः साक्षात् सर्वान्तरस्साक्षी चेता नित्यो गुणो अद्वयः. The self is then known to be intelligence, self-effulgent, a seer, the innermost, existence, free from actions, directly cognized, the self of all, the witness, one imparting consciousness to others, eternal, devoid of qualities and without a second. सन्निधौ सर्वदा तस्य स्यात्तदा भोऽभिमानकृत् आत्मात्मीयं द्वयं चातस्यादहं मम गोचरः. On account of the constant proximity of the conscious self, the ego also appears to be conscious. That is proximate to a red flower, a crystal appears to be red. Hence, the two things, namely oneself, the experiencer, the agent, and things related to oneself, denoted by the words I and mine, originate. जाति कर्मादिमत्वाद्धि तस्मिन् शब्दांस्त्वं कृति न कश्चिद् वर्तते शब्दस्तदभावात् स्वात्मनि. As the ego is possessed of species, action, etc., words are applicable to it, but no word can be used with respect to the innermost self, owing to the absence of these from it. आभासो यत्र यत्रैव शब्दाः प्रत्यग्दृशिं स्थिताः लक्षयेयुर्न साक्षात् तमभिद्युः कथञ्चन न इह जात्याधिमान् कश्चिदर्थशब्दे निरूप्यते. Words which denote the ego and other things which reflect the innermost self express the latter only indirectly, but by no means describe it directly. For nothing that has no species, etc., can be described by means of words. आत्मा भासो यथा हंकृदात्मशब्दस्तथोच्यते उल्मुकादो यथाग्न्यर्थाः परार्थत्वान्न चाञ्जसा. Just as words denoting the word burn, for example, is used with reference to a torch when we say the torch burns a thing. Just as words denoting the action of fire are applied only indirectly and not directly to torches, etc., having fire in them, as they imply a thing, that is fire, different from torches, etc. No words Example, the word I implying existence, knowledge, bliss, etc. Implying the self are applied to the ego, having the reflection of the self and appearing like it. मुखादन्यो मुखाभासो यथा दर्शानुकारतः आभासान् मुखमप्येव मादर्शाननुवर्तनात् अहं कृत्यात्मनिर्भासो मुखाभासवदिष्यते मुखवत् स्मृतात्मान्यो विवेक्तो तौ तथैव च. As it imitates the mirror, the reflection of a face is different from the face. The face which does not depend on the mirror for its existence is also different. As a matter of fact, it is the real face reflected in a mirror and acquiring, as it were, the quality of being in it and possessing its properties. That is called the reflection. The reflection cannot be real because it is not always in the mirror, nor can it be called absolutely unreal because it is sometimes seen there. Therefore, the reflection is indescribable and the face is different from it. So, it is also different from the reflection. Similarly, the reflection of the self in the ego is also regarded as different from the pure self, like that of the face which is different from the face. The pure self is considered to be different from its reflection, like the face which is different from its own. In fact, however, the self and its reflection are free from real distinction between each other, like the face and its reflection. It is free. What does it mean? Though there is an apparent distinction, there is not a real one between the self and its reflection, nor between the self and the intellect. For, as a matter of fact, neither the reflection nor the intellect has an existence independent of self. The conclusion is that pure consciousness, reflected in ignorance and the ego, etc., its modifications, is regarded as the individual experiencing transmigratory existence owing to a non discrimination between itself and its reflection. संसारे च स इत्येक आभासो यस्त्वहं कृति वस्तुच्छाया स्मृतेरन्यन्माधुर्यादि च कारणम्. Objection. Some say that the reflection in the ego, as distinct from the self, is the individual soul, which has an existence depending on that of the face, the experiencer of this transmigratory existence. But if one asks how the reflection, which is not a reality, can experience anything at all, the objector answers that the reflection is a reality as the shadows of things are known to be realities according to the Smriti. One should not deliberately cross the shadows of one's teachers and other superiors. Not only so, there is another reason also why a shadow should be regarded as a reality. For a man in a shadow feels refreshingly cool. नैक नैक ज्ञैकदेशो विकारो वा तदा भासाश्रयः परे अहङ्कर्ता इव संसारे स्वतन्त्र इति केचन. Other objections. Some say that the individual soul is a part of pure consciousness. Others hold that it is a modification of the same. Still others are of opinion that they go together with the reflection of pure consciousness in it is the individual soul. Therefore, a shadow must be a real thing having a property of coolness. Others again think that it is the independent ego, neither a part nor a modification, which is the experiencer of this mundane existence. अहङ्कारादिसन्तानः संसारे नान्वयि क्वचित् इत्येवं सौगता आहुस्तत्र न्यायो विचार्यताम्. The Buddhists say that the series of the momentary meaning produced and destroyed every moment, momentary consciousness, I, and so on, is the individual soul. There is no witness distinct from the series to see the beginning and the end of these momentary phenomena. Now examine which of these doctrines is reasonable, including that of the author. संसारिणां कथा त्वास्तां प्रकृतं त्वधुनोच्यते मुखाभासो य आदर्शे धर्मो नान्यतरस्य सः द्वयोरेकस्य चेद्धर्मो वियुक्तेऽन्यतरे भवेत्. Let us now stop discussing the different doctrines about the transmigratory soul. Let us go on with the present subject, namely the reflection. 5 alternatives are discussed. Verses 37, 38, 39 first line, 39 second line to 43 and 43. The last one is the conclusion according to this book. The reflection of the face in the mirror is a property neither of the face nor of the mirror. For it is, if it were the property of either of the two, it would continue even if the other were removed. मुखेन व्यपदेशात् मुखस्यैवेति चेन्मतं नादर्शानुविधानाच्च मुखे सत्यविभावतः. If it is argued that it, that is the reflection of the face, is a property of the face because it, means reflection of the face, is called after it, that cannot be so. For it imitates, that is undergoes changes that the mirror is subject to the mirror and is not seen even when the face is there, but a mirror is removed. द्वयोरेवेति चेत्तन्न द्वयोरेवाप्य दर्शनात् अदृश्यस्य सतो दृष्टिस्याद्राहोश्चन्द्रसूर्ययोः. First line. If you say that it is the property of both, we say no, because it is not seen even when both are present, but improperly placed. Second line, objection. It may be said that Rahu, a real thing, though invisible, is sometimes seen during eclipses in the sun and the moon. So the reflection of the face is a reality, though invisible, is sometimes when a mirror is properly placed, seen in the mirror. राहोः रागेव वस्तुत्वं सिद्धं शास्त्रप्रमाणतः छायापक्षे त्ववस्तुत्वं तस्य स्यात् पूर्वयुक्तितः. Reply: the Rahu is a real thing, is known from the scriptures, but there is no such evidence with regard to the existence of the reflection before one sees it in the sun or moon. But according to those who hold that it is the shadow of the earth, it cannot be a real thing, and the unreality of the reflection has been proved by argument before. छायाक्रान्तेर्निषेधोऽयं न तु वस्तुत्वसाधकः न ह्यर्थान्तरनिष्ठं सद्वाक्यमर्थान्तरं वदेत्. This is a prohibition regarding the crossing of the shadows of one's teachers and other superiors, but it does not prove the reality of a shadow, as a sentence expressing one meaning cannot express another at the same time. माधुर्यादि च यत्कार्यमुष्णद्रव्याद्य सेवनात् छायाया न त्वदृष्टत्वादपामेव च दर्शनात्. That one feels cool while sitting in a shadow is not the effect of the shadow on one. It is due to the one's refraining from using warm things. Coolness is found to belong to water but not to the shadow. For sitting in the shadow of a hot piece of stone, one does not feel cool at all. आत्माभासाश्रयाश्चैवं मुखाभासाश्रया यथा गम्यन्ते शास्त्रयुक्तेभ्यामाभासा सत्वमेव च. The self, its reflection, and the seat of the reflection, that is the intellect, are comparable to the face, its reflection, and the mirror. The unreality of the reflection is known from the scriptures and reasoning. न दृशेरविकारित्वादाभासस्याप्यवस्तुतः नाचितित्वादहं कर्तु कस्य संसारिता भवेत्. Objection: who is the experiencer of transmigratory existence, as it cannot belong to the self, which is changeless, neither to the reflection, which is not real, nor to the ego, which is not a conscious entity. अविद्यामात्रैवातः संसारोऽस्त्वविवेकतः कूटस्थेनात्मना नित्यमात्मवानात्मनीव सः. Reply: let the transmigratory condition then be only a delusion due to indiscrimination between the self and the non-self. It always has an apparent existence due to the real existence on the changeless self, real existence of the changeless self, and therefore appears to be pertaining to it. रज्जु सर्पो यथा रज्वा सात्मकः प्राग्विवेकतः अवस्तु सन्नपेयेष कूटस्थेनात्मना तथा. Just as a rope mistaken for a snake, though unreal, has an existence due to that of the rope before the discrimination between the rope and the snake takes place. So the transmigratory condition, though unreal, is possessed of an existence, empirical or phenomenal existence, due to that real existence of the changeless self. आत्मा भाषा श्रेष्ठात्मा प्रत्यय स्वैर्विकारवान् सुखी दुखी च संसारे नित्यैवेति केचन. Some say that the self to which the reflection belongs, though changeful on account of the modification of the mind pertaining to itself, such as I am happy, I am miserable, and though the experiencer of the transmigratory condition is eternal. आत्मा भाषा परिज्ञानाद्याथात्म्येन विमोहिताः अहं कर्तारमात्मेति मन्यन्ते ते निरागमाः. Having no knowledge of the Vedas and deluded on account of the lack of real knowledge of the self and its reflection, they consider the ego to be the self. संसारो वस्तु संस्थेषां कर्तृ भोक्तृत्व लक्षणः आत्मा भाषाश्रयात् ज्ञानात् संसरन्त्यविवेकतः. The transmigratory existence consisting of agency and experiencing of pain and pleasure is according to them a reality. They therefore continue to be born again and again on account of the ignorance of the nature of the self, its reflection and the seat of the reflection, the intellect between which they cannot discriminate. चैतन्य भासता बुद्धेरात्मनस्तत्व तत्स्वरूपता स्याच्चेत्तं ज्ञानशब्दैश्च वेदशास्तीति युज्यते. That the Vedas imply the self by means of words such as knowledge, words such as existence, bliss, and so on, becomes reasonable if it is true. These words will then be applied directly to the intellect with the reflection of the self in it and indirectly to the self. That the self is of the nature of pure consciousness and the intellect has its reflection in it. प्रकृति प्रत्ययार्थौ यौ भिन्नावेकाश्रयौ यथा करोति गच्छति इत्यादौ दृष्टौ लोकप्रसिद्धितः ज्ञानयोर्द्व्याश्रयत्वं च लोके दृष्टं स्मृतौ तथा जानात्यर्थेषु को हेतुर्द्व्याश्रयत्वे निगद्यताम्. Objection. It is well known among the people that the meaning, the discussion begun here ends in verse 69. The meaning of root is an action. It is well known among the people that the meaning of the root is that the meaning of the verbal suffix is agency. Meaning and that of the verbal suffix though different from each other in each of the words such as does, goes, etc. are seen to belong to the same subject. Example Devadatta. They are not seen to belong to two different subjects either according to ordinary people or grammarians. Now, please tell me the reason why the meanings of the root and the suffix should belong to two different subjects in the case of the words such as knows, etc. आत्मा भासस्तु तिग्वांशो धात्वर्थश्च ध्यक्रिया उभयं चाविवेकेन जानाति इत्युच्यते मृषा. Reply. The meaning of the suffix is the reflection of the self In the intellect, under root denotes an action, that is, a modification of the intellect. As the intellect and the reflection are not discriminated from the self, the word knows, meaning wrongly that the self is the agent of the action of knowing, is predicated falsely about it. न बुद्धेरवबोधोऽस्ति नात्मनो विद्यते क्रिया अतो नान्यतरस्यापि जानातीति च युज्यते. The intellect has no consciousness and the self no action. The word knows can therefore reasonably be applied to neither of them. नाप्यतो भावशब्देन ज्ञप्तिरित्यपि युज्यते न ह्यात्मा विक्रियात्मात्रो नित्यात्मेति शासनात्. The word knowledge is in the sense of the action of knowing, cannot similarly be applied to the self, for the self is not a change only as it is indicated by the action, inasmuch as it is taught in the Shrutis that it is eternal. न बुद्धेर्बुद्धिवाच्यत्वं करणं न यकर्तृकं नापि ज्ञायते इत्येवं कर्मशब्दैर्निरूप्यते. The word knowledge in the sense of the instrument of the action of knowing is applied to the intellect and not to the self, as an instrument cannot exist without an agent. If the self becomes an instrument, there will be no agent left. Neither can the world in the sense of that which is the object of the action of knowledge, action of knowing, be applied to the self. न येषामेकमेव एवात्मा निर्दुःखो विक्रियः सदा तेषां स्यात् शब्दवाच्यत्वं ज्ञेयत्वं चात्मनः सदा. The self is never knowable and is not directly denoted by the word. According to those who hold, it is the doctrine of the author that it is eternally changeless, free from pain, and one only. यदाहं कर्तुरात्मत्वं तदा शब्दार्थमुख्यता नाशनायादिमत्वात्तु श्रुतौ तस्यात्मतेष्यते. If the ego were the self, a word might be applied to it in its primary sense. But it is not the self according to the Shruti, as it is possessed of hunger, etc. हन्त तर्हि न मुख्यार्थो नापि गौणः कथञ्चन जानाति इत्यादि शब्दस्य गतिर्वाच्या तथापि तु. शब्दानामयथार्थत्वे वेदस्याप्यप्रमाणता सा च नेष्टा ततो ग्राह्या गतिरस्य प्रसिद्धितः. प्रसिद्धिर्मूढलोकस्य यदि ग्राह्या निरात्मता लोकायतिकसिद्धान्तः सा च नेष्टा प्रसज्यते. अभियुक्तप्रसिद्धिश्चेत् पूर्ववत् दुर्विवेकता गतिशून्यं न वेदोऽयं प्रमाणं संवदत्युत. Objection. Well, words that have no primary meanings can have no secondary ones also. Therefore, you are to explain the application of the words knows, etc. The Vedas would lose their authority as an evidence if words were false, meaning having no meanings. But that is not desirable, for the Vedas are the only evidence regarding the self. Reply: should one therefore have to accept the application of words according to popular usage? Objection: if you accept the usage of ignorant people, you will have to arrive at the conclusion of the Charvakas, who hold that there is no self other than the body, but that is undesirable. If, on the other hand, you accept the usage of the learned, you will arrive at the same dilemma as before. The Vedas, which are an authority, do not use meaningless words. आदर्शे मुखसामान्यं मुखस्येष्टं हि मानवैः मुखस्य प्रतिबिम्बो हि मुखाकारेण दृश्यते. यत्र 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 यस्यावभासस्तु तयोरेवाविवेकतः जानातीति क्रियां सर्वो लोको वक्ति स्वभावतः. Reply: as the reflection appears like the face, people accept its oneness with its reflection in a mirror. All people therefore naturally use the verbs knows, etc., owing to the indiscrimination between that the intellect in which there is the reflection and that the self which is reflected. बुद्धेः कर्तृत्वमध्यस्य जानातीति ज्ञ उच्यते तथा चैतन्यमध्यस्य तत्त्वं बुद्धेरिहोच्यते. Self is said to be knowing, to be the agent of knowing things on account of the superimposition of the agency of the intellect on it. Similarly, the intellect is called a knower owing to the superimposition of consciousness on it. स्वरूपं चात्मनो ज्ञानं नित्यं ज्योतिश्रुतेर्यतः न बुद्ध्या क्रियते तस्मान्नात्मन्नान्येन वा सदा. Being eternal, knowledge, which is the nature of the self described by the Shrutis, as the light of consciousness, is never created by the intellect, by itself or by anything else, by the eye, etc. देहेऽहं प्रत्ययो यद्वत् जानातीति च लौकिकाः वदन्ति ज्ञानकर्तृत्वं तद्वत् बुद्धेस्तथात्मनः. Just as people regard their bodies as themselves and say that they, bodies, know things, so they speak of the intellect having the agency in producing knowledge and of the self as being its seat. बौद्धैस्तु प्रत्ययैरेवं क्रियमाणैश्च चिन्निभैः मोहिताः क्रियते ज्ञानमित्याहुस्तार्किका जनाः. Deluded thus by the modifications of the intellect which appear owing to the mutual superimposition of the self and the intellect, which appear to be conscious and are created, the argumentative philosophers say that knowledge is produced तस्मात् ज्ञाभासबुद्धीनाम् अविवेकात् प्रवर्तिताः जानाति इत्यादिशब्दश्च प्रत्ययो याच तत्स्मृतिः. Therefore the words knows etc. The corresponding modifications of the mind and their memory are possible on account of the indiscrimination regarding the self, the intellect and the reflection of the self in it. आदर्शानुविधायित्वं छायाया अस्य ते मुखं बुद्धिधर्मानुकारित्वं ज्ञाभासस्य तथेष्यते. Just as the properties, dark spots, etc., of a mirror assumed by the reflection of the face in it are attributed to the face, so the properties, agency, etc., of the intellect assumed by the reflection of the self are superimposed to the self. बुद्धिस्तु प्रत्ययास्तस्मादात्मा भासेन दीपिताः ग्राहिका इव भासन्ते दहन्ति वोल्मुकादयः. Therefore, just as torches and other things appear to be possessed of the power of burning on account of there being fire in them, so the modifications of the intellect, illumined by the reflection of the self, appear to be endowed with the power of perception. स्वयमेवावभास्यन्ते ग्राहकाः स्वयमेव च इत्येवं ग्राहकास्तित्वं प्रतिषिध्यन्ति सौगताः. The Buddhist philosophers deny the existence of a witness by saying that the modifications of the intellect are themselves perceivers and are also perceived by themselves. यद्येवं नान्यदृश्यास्ते किं तद्वारणमुच्यतां भावाभावो हि तेषां यो नान्यग्राह्यो सतां यदि अन्वयीग्राहकस्तेषामित्येतदपि तत्समम् अचितित्वस्य तुल्यत्वादन्यस्मिन् ग्राहके सति. Say, addressed to the Vedantins who do not accept a reflection of the self, say how to refute the Buddhists who hold that the modifications of the intellect are not illumined by the modification witness different from them. In refuting the Buddhists, it may be said by the said Vedanti that though a persistent, known to be so on the evidence of recognition, the knower is the same in respect of all the modifications. The persistent knower, different from the modifications, revealing their presence and absence, must be accepted. It is not necessary to assume a reflection of the self. Reply. This to the Vedantins, reply to the Vedantis who do not accept the reflection of the self. This persistent knower also is no better than the modifications themselves, as the said knower, different from the modifications, will be equally non-conscious. For being a knower, an agent of knowing, it will fall into the category of the non-self, and so will be non-conscious. अध्यक्षस्य समीपे तु सिद्धिः स्यादिति चेन्मतं नाध्यक्षेनुपकारित्वादन्यत्रापि प्रसंगतः. If you, those Vedantis who do not accept the reflection of the self, if you are of opinion that the presence and absence of the modifications will be known owing to the proximity of the permanent knower. We say no, for the changeless knower will be of no utility, even admitted that it will reveal them by its proximity only. Everything, including non conscious objects, inasmuch as the knower is all pervading, will have mental modifications. अर्थी दुःखी च यः श्रोता स त्वध्यक्षोऽथ वेतरः अध्यक्षस्य च दुःखित्वम् अर्थित्वं च न ते मतम् कर्ताध्यक्षः सदस्मीति नैव सद्ग्रहमर्हति सदैवासीति मिथ्योक्ति श्रुतेरपि न युज्यते अविविच्योभयं वक्ति श्रुतिश्चेत् स्यात् ग्रहस्तथा अस्मदस्तु विविच्यैव त्वमेवेति वदेद्यदि प्रत्ययान्वयी निष्ठत्वं मुक्तदोषप्रसज्यते is the hearer, that is the aspirant, who is suffering from the misery due to transmigratory existence and seeking liberation, the witness itself or other than it? That the witness is subject to misery and desirous of liberation is not your view, for in the absence of a reflection, the witness, untouched by ignorance and its effects, cannot become an aspirant. If, on the other hand, to be other than the witness, he then an agent cannot accept the idea, I am Brahman, the witness. And in that case, the teaching of the Shruti, thou art that, would be false, which is not reasonable. But this teaching may be accepted if the Shruti teaches it without discriminating the two, the self and the ego. But if the Shruti discriminates, the refutation of the Sankhyas who do not accept the reflection of the self in the intellect. But if the Shruti discriminates the ego from the innermost self and then says to the ego that thou art, the defects spoken of in the previous verse will creep in. त्वमित्यध्यक्ष निष्ठश्चेदहमध्यक्षयोः कथं सम्बन्धो वाच्यैवात्र येन त्वमिति लक्षयेत. If you, the Sankhyas, say that the word thou means finally the witness, you must explain how there can be a relation. As the reflection is not accepted, the relation cannot be ascertained. Relation between it and the ego, so that the word thou may express the witness directly. द्रष्टृ दृश्यत्व संबंधो यद्यध्यक्षे क्रिये कथम्. Objection. Suppose the relation is one of the seer and the seen. Reply. How can it be with regard to the witness which is devoid of activity? अक्रियत्वेऽपि तादात्म्यमध्यक्षस्य भवेत् यदि आत्माध्यक्षो ममास्तीति सम्बन्धाग्रहणेन धीः. If it be contended that there will be the identity of the ego and the witness though the latter is devoid of activity, we say it cannot be so, for the knowledge of the said identity will not be there in the absence of the knowledge of the relation that myself, the witness, exists. संबंधग्रहणं शास्त्रादिति चेन्मन्यसे नहि पूर्वोक्तास्योस्त्रिधा दोषा ग्रहो वा स्यान्ममेति च. If you think that the relation will be known from the scriptures, it cannot be so. For in that case, all the three defects spoken of before will arise. First, the ego cannot draw the relation as it is non-conscious. Second, the same is the case with the witness as it is changeless, and the non-conscious ego cannot be taught by the Shruti. And if there be a knowledge of the relation at all, it will be one of mind, but not of identity. अदृशीर्दृशिरूपेण भाति बुद्धिर्यदा तदा प्रत्यया अपि तस्यास्योस्तप्तायो विस्फुलिङ्गवत्. When it is accepted that the non-conscious intellect appears to be conscious, its modifications also appear to be so, like sparks of red hot iron. It is the conclusion. आभासस्तद्भावश्च दृशस्सिम्नो न चान्यथा लोकस्य युक्तितस्यातां तद्ग्रहश्च तथा सति. The knowledge on the part of the people of the appearance and disappearance of the mental modifications is reasonably possible only on account of the existence of the witness. The limit for it is left over when everything else is negated. The limit and not in the contrary case. And in that case, namely, if the reflection of the self is accepted, the intellect may know itself to be Brahman. नन्वेवं दृश्यसंक्रान्तिरयः पिण्डेऽग्निवद् भवेत् मुखाभासवदित्येत दादर्शे तन्निराकृतम्. Objection. Is it not a change on the part of the self to pervade the intellect, like fire pervading a mass of iron? Reply. We have refuted this in the example of the face and its reflection in the mirror. कृष्णायो लोहिताभासमित्येतद्दृष्टमुच्यते दृष्टदाष्टान्ततुल्यत्वं न तु सर्वात्मना क्वचित्. That black iron appears to be red is only an example to illustrate the fact that the non-conscious intellect appears to be conscious. An illustration and its subject can nowhere be absolutely similar in all respects. तथैव चेतनाभासं चित्तं चैतन्यवद् भवेत् मुखाभासो यथा दर्शे आभासश्चोदितो मृषा. Reflecting consciousness, therefore, the intellect appears to be conscious like a mirror, reflecting a face and appearing like it. It has already been said that the reflection is not real. चित्तं चेतनमित्येतत् शास्त्रयुक्तिविवर्जितं देहस्यापि प्रसङ्गस्यात् चक्षुरादेस्तथैव च. It is not supported by the scriptures or reasoning that the intellect is conscious, for in that case the body, the eye, etc. also would be so. तदप्यस्त्विति चेतन्न लोकायतिकसङ्गतेः न च धीदृशिरस्मीति यद्याभासो न चेतसे. Objection. Let them be so. Reply. No, for in that case the position of the Charvak philosophers comes in. Moreover, the knowledge I am Brahman will also not be possible, for the self is changeless and the intellect is non-conscious. If there be no reflection of the self in the intellect. सदस्मीति धियो भावे व्यर्थं स्यात् तत्त्वमस्यपि युष्मदस्मद्विभागज्ञे स्यादर्थवदिदं वचः. The teaching thou art that will surely be useless in the absence of the knowledge I am Brahman. This teaching is of use to those only who are acquainted with the discrimination between the self and the not self. ममेदं प्रत्ययो ज्ञेयो युष्मद् इत्येव न संशयः. अहमित्यस्मदेष्टस्यादयमस्मीति चोभयोः. Mine and it are ideas predicated of the non-self and the idea I of the ego, which appears like the self through the reflection. The ideas such as I am a man are predicated to both the self, the empirical self, the ego, and the non-self. अन्योन्यापेक्षया तेषां प्रधानगुणतेष्यते विशेषणविशेषत्वं तथा ग्राह्यं हि युक्तितः. They, the ideas about the empirical self and the non-self, should be regarded as principal and subordinate with relation to one another and be taken as the qualified or qualifying according to reason. ममेदं द्वयमप्येतन्मध्यमस्य विशेषणं धनी गोमान्यथा तद्वद्देहोऽहं कर्तुरेव च. Both the ideas mine and it are qualifications. In relation to the idea I am man, wealth or a cow described as it is described as mine in relation to one's gross body. A man having wealth and a man having a cow. Similarly, the gross body is the qualification of the ego. The empirical self described as myself, the ego again is the qualification of the innermost self. When one says I am the witness. बुद्ध्यारूढं सदा सर्वं साहंकर्ता साक्षिणः तस्मात् सर्वावभासोऽज्ञः किञ्चिदप्यस्पृशन् सदा. Everything, the gross body and things connected with it, pervaded by the intellect together with the ego, including the whole of the subtle body, is the qualification of the witness. Without being connected with anything and pervading everything by means of its reflection, the self is therefore always of the nature of knowledge itself. This is how the self is discriminated from the non-self. प्रतिलोममिदं सर्वं यथोक्तं लोकबुद्धितः अविवेकधियामस्ति नास्ति सर्वं विवेकिनाम्. All this, described according to popular ideas, is the reverse of what is true and exists for the undiscriminating. It means everything described as qualification in the two previous verses does not exist at all for men of knowledge. अन्वयव्यतिरेकौ हि पदार्थस्य पदस्य च स्यादेतदहमित्यत्र युक्तिरेवावधारणे. Agreement. The self is always the witness and never ceases to exist. It is self-existent and never a qualification. It is therefore real. And contrary, the ego etc. that are witnessed by the self are dependent for their existence on it, are always of the nature of qualifications. They are therefore unreal. These are what are called agreement and contrariety with regard to the meaning of the words. The words such as self, existence, knowledge, bliss, etc. imply pure consciousness. They are neither qualifications nor denote anything qualified. The words agent, experiencer, knower, thin, fat, and so on do not denote pure consciousness. They are applied to the self. When the body, the senses, etc. qualify it. These are what are called agreement and contrariety with regard to words. Agreement and contrariety with regard to words and with regard to their meanings are the only means by which the meaning implied by the word I may be ascertained, but not the absolute oneness of the meanings of the word thou and that. नाद्राक्षमहमित्यस्मिन् सुषुप्तेऽन्यन्मनागपि न वारयति दृष्टिं स्वां प्रत्ययं तु निषेधति. Waking up from deep sleep and one says, I did not see anything at all in that state. From this it is clear that one denies the existence of the mental modifications, the knower, knowing, and the known, in deep sleep, but not that of knowledge itself. स्वयं ज्योतिर्नहि द्रष्टुरित्येवं संविदो स्थितां स्वयमेवाब्रवीत् शास्त्रं प्रत्ययावगति पृथक्. The scriptures themselves discriminate between knowledge itself on the one hand and the mental modifications, the knower, knowing, and the known on the other, and prove that the former is changeless and really existing, and that the latter deviate from existence. As they say, it is self-luminous, and the knowledge of the knower does not cease to exist. एवं विज्ञातवाक्यार्थे श्रुतिलोकप्रसिद्धितः श्रुतिस्तत्त्वमसीत्याह श्रोतुर्मोहानुपत्तये ब्रह्मादाशरथेर्यद्वदुक्त्यैवापानुदत्तमः तस्य विष्णुत्वसम्बोधे नयन्त्रान्तरमूचिवान्. Just as Brahma removed the ignorance, it was assumed by him out of his own accord in order to veil his powers for some time. Removed the ignorance of the son of Dashrath by means of words. The words are, you are Vishnu and not the son of Dashrath. Words only, but did not teach him any action in order that he might know that he was Vishnu. So in order that one's ignorance may be removed, the Shruti teaches one that thou art. When one has learnt the meanings of the subordinate sentences, example existence, knowledge, unlimited Brahman, according to the Shrutis, and thus has learnt the meaning implied by the word I. And popular grammar. अहम शब्दस्य निष्ठाया ज्योतिषी प्रत्यगात्मनि सयोक्ता सदसीत्येवं फलं तत्र विमुक्तता. It is the indirectly expressed meaning of the word I, namely the innermost and self-luminous self, which is expressed in the teaching that thou art, and the result is liberation. Shrutomatreణ, and the result is revelation. When the knowledge I am Brahman arises on being taught that thou art. श्रुतमात्रेण चेन्न स्यात् कार्यं तत्र भवेत् ध्रुवं व्यवहारात् पुरापिष्टः सद्भावः स्वयमात्मनः. It would surely be necessary to admit an injunction. Example, an injunction regarding the mental repetition of the idea I am Brahman. If right knowledge were not produced immediately when one was taught that one is Brahman, the self exists in its own nature even before one is taught the meaning of the sentence that thou art. The Shruti is the right evidence regarding the knowledge of the eternally existing self. It cannot therefore be said that a wrong knowledge, a futile knowledge, a doubtful knowledge, or no knowledge is produced from the sentence. So the knowledge arising from the Shruti is not wrong. अशनायादि निर्मुक्त्यै तत्काला जायते प्रमा तत्वमस्यादि वाक्यार्थे त्रिषु कालेप्य संशयः. The listening of to the teaching and the production of right knowledge are simultaneous, and the result is the cessation, which is directly felt, and therefore the knowledge is not futile. Suggestion of the transmigratory existence consisting of hunger, etc. There can be no doubt. It is felt that one is Brahman in the past, present, and future. The knowledge is therefore not doubtful. No doubt about the meaning of the sentences like that thou art in the past, present, and future. प्रतिबन्धविहीनत्वात् स्वयं चानुभवात्मनः जायेतैव प्रमा तत्र स्वात्मन्येव न संशयः. The right knowledge of the self, which is of the nature of pure consciousness, is no doubt produced in one at a time of listening to the teaching, as all obstacles are removed beforehand through the method of agreement and contrariety. The ignorance of the implied meaning of the word thou and that is the only obstacle to the right knowledge of self Brahman. It cannot therefore be said that no knowledge is produced. किं सदैवाहमस्मीति किं वान्यत् प्रतिपद्यते सदैव चेदहं शब्दस्तथा मुख्यार्थ इष्यताम् अन्यच्चेत् सदहं ग्राह प्रतिपत्तिर्मृषैव सा तस्मान् मुख्यग्रहे नास्ति वारणावगतेरिह. Does one understand the word I to mean Brahman itself or something other than it? When one is taught the word Brahman, if it is understood to mean Brahman itself, you must accept the absolute identity directly expressed by the word art, the copula in the sentence, the word Brahman. Absolute identity of the meaning of the word I and that of the word Brahman. But if the word I implies something other than Brahman, the knowledge I am Brahman certainly becomes false. The arising of the knowledge of their absolute identity from this sentence cannot therefore be denied. प्रत्ययी प्रत्ययश्चैव यदा भासो तदर्थता तयोरचिति मत्वाच्च चैतन्ये कल्प्यते फलम्. Having the reflection of the self in them, the intellect and its modification exist. Therefore, they cannot be connected with liberation. The result of right knowledge exist for it and are non-conscious. Liberation is the result is therefore supposed to be in the conscious self. कूटस्थेऽपि फलं योग्यं राजनीव जयादिकं तदनात्मत्वहेतुभ्यां क्रियायाः प्रत्ययस्य च. As neither the intellect with the reflection of the self nor its modification in the form of the ego is of the nature of the result, that is revelation, or its material cause, the result is capable of being attributed to the self through self, though immutable, like victory to a king.